Our guest today is Coach Bob Donewald, head basketball coach here at ISU. Coach, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Terry. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'll look forward to the next few minutes where we have a chance to talk about Illinois State University and its basketball program.
And quite a basketball program it's been, too. This is headed into your 7th season here, and I'm sure most of the listeners who watch your games see athletic students running around. We here tend to talk about the concept of a student athlete, and maybe that's a good place to start. Your concept of the student athlete.
I think sometimes it's an overused word. Unfortunately, I think too often in college athletics today, it's a term that isn't used as it should be. We see too many situations in which the student, the young man trying to go to college and play athletics, and in this particular situation, basketball, is exploited. First, last, and foremost, he, like everyone else, is there to get an education. And whenever something prevents him from obtaining that primary objective, he's really being cheated, and all too often it's due to an exploitation. We think at Illinois State the young man should be treated as every other student, although we recognize that there are added dimensions and pressures, time commitments on him, as opposed to many other students. Yet in a final analysis, it isn't how many rebounds or how many baskets that will determine whether he has had a successful experience here at ISU. Is he prepared to go on with life long after he's too old and too slow to ever get another basket or make another basket or get another rebound or make some of those beautiful steals or the slam dunks of a Ricky Johnson? So student athlete is a very important word in our vocabulary here at ISU. We want our young men graduating, but not just graduating, Terry. You know, you can actually graduate and not be prepared. We want our young people to be prepared to go out into this world and make a very positive contribution in whatever field of endeavor they so choose.
Bob, as the season progresses, it has often occurred to me that the young men in the basketball program, and I think this is true of all athletes, because athletes in every sport have to take it pretty seriously in order to compete at our level. But it's often occurred to me that they spend a great many hours each week involved with athletics, hours where they are exerting maximum physical exertion, where they can't be studying. What are some of the ways we have of trying to help these young people be successful as students when they're spending so many hours on the road, on games, or in practice? How do we help them?
To begin with, Dr. Watkins, it starts with the professors here at the university who have been exceptionally cooperative and understanding of the particular needs of our kids and have spent at their own time and own expense a tremendous, would probably be a better word, amount of time working with young people when they are available, our students or our players, when they are available, to help them catch up. You know, you've already touched upon some things. The amount of time and energy. You've also got emotional energy, the amount of time away from the university community so that we can play at Tulsa or Wichita or DePaul or wherever.
I suppose some of the exhaustion after a game is more emotional and physical.
Absolutely. Oftentimes our players are up till 2 or 3 in the morning just attempting to unwind. Now, if you have an 8 o'clock class and you've been up till 2 or 3 in the morning just trying to unwind and get yourself ready to go, that's a little bit tougher than if you've been relaxing until about 11 or 12 o'clock or even 1 o'clock in the morning and then gone on and gone to bed. In addition to that, we have support groups around them. Dr. Rademacher is very much involved with our student athletes. We attempt to get them a tutoral program, not just for the youngster who's trying to stay eligible, but for the youngster who may be attempting to get the A in a particular course as a B, which, as we all well know, can drastically affect the opportunities for him when it comes time for graduate school.
For instance, Mark Zwart was successful and is now in graduate school.
Yes, he is. And Mark isn't the only one. Anthony Jones, of course, on our own staff, received his master's degree here at the university. And we've had other youngsters go on, David Nussbaumer. It is important that we provide our young people with every conceivable type of assistance necessary, not to get them the marks, but to provide them with the necessary information so that they are as prepared as the student who is there on a day-to-day basis.
You know, I'm aware, and I'm sure that many of the listeners are not, that at the same time you have never asked anybody to cut a corner on teaching an athlete, that it's always they must come up to the professor's mark. And I think that the audience might be interested to know some of the, I guess the players at the time may have thought it was rather harsh, but some of the things that you have done to let players know that they can expect no smoothing of the road. They're going to have to do it academically. They're going to have to achieve. What are some stories that you feel you could share? I know I don't want to embarrass any of your players or you, but I know you have adopted the attitude of finding out when a player is in trouble, and then instead of going to the professor and asking the professor to ease up, going to the player and saying to the player, you had better perform.
I establish that entire philosophy when I make the home visit with a prospect when he's still a high school youngster and his family. And I let them know exactly what will and what will not be tolerated and what my actions will be. And one of the first things that I do whenever I receive information that a youngster is not living up to his responsibilities as a student is I immediately notify the home. And I let them know exactly what steps are going to be taken to correct the situation. And I also get a commitment from the youngster as well as his family that they will support this type of action on our part should their son, for whatever reason, not be doing the job that he needs to do. We will bring them early on in the morning into study hall type situations. We will restrict their weekends and put youngsters actually on a 7-day study table. We will provide them with very little free time whatsoever. We will totally structure their environment or their time so that they don't waste their time. We will require the youngster to meet on a regular basis with his professor and to find out exactly what areas he's falling short in and why, and to receive whatever tutoral type of assistance is necessary to get him to a level where he can do the job. Then we get into the athletic phase of it. And I very quickly will tell a youngster that, now listen, you aren't going to compete on this basketball team until you start performing in the classroom. I've required parents to come to the university campus and sit down with our academic people and discuss the progress of a youngster. One of the things that I try to assure a parent that I will do, and I think most of them understand that I'll do everything within my power to help that young man become the best basketball player that he can be. But in addition, I try to assure the parent that I will do everything within my power to assure that that young man achieves his number one priority, and that's academic success.
So those are the kind of young people you try to recruit, the ones who you would like to have skilled athletes. You have skilled athletes, but they must also make a commitment to being students at the university first.
I tell them that if they aren't unwilling for whatever reason to make that commitment, they should not consider Illinois State, and that should they come to Illinois State with a misconception and think that, well, college. See, I tell kids that, you turn on television on Saturday afternoon and you see all the hoopla on the stands and you say, boy, that's neat and exciting, and it is. That's a very positive part of our program. But by the same token, I said, you don't understand now what happens after the game is over and what all a youngster must do in order to compete not only with the very best basketball players in the country, but some of the very best students in the country on a daily basis. And I tell our kids that if you aren't willing to make that type of commitment, you aren't willing to assume those responsibilities, then I will take whatever actions are necessary in order for one of two things to happen: to assure academic success or ultimately for you to leave the basketball program.
I think it's fair for me to say, you probably be too modest to say it, Bob, but it's fair for me to say that I'm aware of at least one or two instances where you were very interested in a in an athlete, maybe not a student, in an athlete with very high skills, and you dropped interest in that athlete when it became apparent that this athlete didn't want to be a student athlete. I'm aware of instances where you didn't recruit a person because you felt absolutely certain that the individual was not willing to take the academic responsibility upon his shoulders. I commend you for that.
Well, I appreciate that. Not only that, but Dr. Watkins, and I see this not only here at Illinois State University, but I see this throughout the country, that I believe there is a tightening of the screws, and that's the term I use with these young kids that are in high school, relative to what will be expected of them from an academic standpoint at major universities throughout this country. And I tell kids today that it will be more difficult for them to achieve success academically than it was for youngsters who graduated from this institution and any other institution in the last 10 years. I see what I see are greater demands upon the student from an academic standpoint, justifiably so. I think we have allowed and tolerated too many things at higher ed, not only at the higher level, but even at the secondary level. I'm not sure that our kids are coming to us in certain areas as well qualified as they need to be. And what I'm seeing across America is a greater emphasis put on academic requirements on the student athlete.
Academic competence.
Absolutely, thank you. And not only just on athletes though, but on students in general.
Right.
And now we tell our kids, hey, you need to understand exactly what's going to be required and expected of you, and it isn't going to be any easier for you to compete in that classroom than it will be on the basketball floor. They take a look at a Mark Aguirre or some of the great players that are in right now. And they would talk about the DePaul team going against the Comegys, and I'd say, boy, how easy do you think that will be? And they say, well, Coach, that wouldn't be very easy at all. And I say, you're absolutely right. Well, wait till you get into that classroom, mister, and you're competing against a youngster that is as dedicated to academic excellence as that youngster is to getting rebounds and making baskets, and you're in a whole new ball game there as well as out on a basketball court.
Bob, let's turn to some other things that our listeners will want to hear about. We're in the process of attempting to get final approvals to build a new arena, which would be a beautiful structure, would seat 10,500 fans, have excellent seating. If we're able to do that, and we're cautiously optimistic as we speak here this morning, what effect do you think that would have on the basketball program at Illinois State University?
I think the number one effect it has, Dr. Watkins, is I think it demonstrates not only to prospective student athletes, but it demonstrates to the entire university community, to college basketball athletics throughout this country, the commitment that Illinois State University is making to its basketball program. We right now are living in an archaic, overcommitted facility.
That's really true. It is overcommitted, and of course I'm looking at it from the standpoint of freeing that up a little for recreation. So
we need recreational facilities
really
on this campus.
Sure.
We are actually behind the times in that area. And,
with 8,000 students living on campus and many thousands more around the perimeter. But
plus,
go ahead, I broke
plus
into
community
your answer.
people who like to use,
exactly.
and it provides so many, but it is overused, it's overworked, it's overcommitted.
Even coaches and presidents need some place to walk
Absolutely,
and jog,
walk and jog,
right.
and I see many professors over there early in the morning, and but we need this type of commitment. We need to demonstrate to all concerned exactly where Illinois State stands, and then the ramifications, as we've just touched upon, of then once you have such a facility and what you can do with the present Horton Fieldhouse and what you can do to provide greater services for the students as well as the entire university community in other directions. I believe that is the overriding thing. It demonstrates to all concerned the commitment that Illinois State University is making to its basketball program and a recognition of the need to upgrade and update its present facilities as well as to build new structures.
Let's talk a little about the upcoming year now. I know everybody is interested in hearing what you think about how this year's team might compare with the past two teams in style or strength and attitude and leadership. You've had some awfully good teams since you've been here, 6 excellent seasons. How do you think we'll do? Are we rebuilding? Is this going to be a year where we will be a contender again? What do you think?
I think the last 2 seasons have been predominantly junior, senior dominated basketball teams. This year will be a little bit different. We will have a strong senior class, but with the exception of William Anderson, our only junior, we immediately go to the younger classes. that will be strange or a little bit unique in that how the freshmen and the sophomores blend in with the older kids, how quickly they can make the transition from minor roles to the new kids on campus to very significant contributors, I think will determine in a final analysis what type of basketball team we have. Needless to say, we need a very positive contribution from our senior class almost on in every given game. We can't go immediately to the juniors.
Now name that senior class for our listeners. Who are the people we're talking about?
The four young men that we're talking about are Lou Stefanovic, Michael McKinney, Ricky Johnson, and Brad Duncan. Those four have made a contribution, various roles for the past 4 years, and they certainly will be the nucleus of this team. But it will be important for the younger kids now to complement them and surround them and be able. We'll need to be able to plug them into various roles, and they'll need to come through for us. Now, the question remains, all right, are they ready? I would say, as we sit here today, no. Now, then the next question is, well, will they be ready December 1, which is theoretically the starting date? We actually start before that, but we use December 1. Or if they're not quite ready by then, will they be ready when we start league play in early January? Those are the questions I wish I had answers for those. I can't answer that now. And really, what we'll do during the month of December is put them in enough situations where we'll be able to evaluate their progress. I've always believed that you need 10 games in order to evaluate your strengths and weaknesses. You need to be ahead, behind, games back-to-back,
different
foul
situations.
troubles. Every conceivable situation that you could be in theoretically will happen within 10 basketball games. I will have a much better handle on exactly who we are and who we are not after those 10. You ask about league play. I think there were only 2 teams last year that really, through graduation, had significant losses. One was Tulsa and the other ourselves. I believe our losses were greater because the freshman class at Tulsa last year was an outstanding class. I think it will be easier for them to replace their 2 kids more than ours. And I'm referring to Hank Cornley and Mark Zwart.
Outstanding athletes gave you a lot of good playing time over the years.
For 4 consecutive years.
Right.
They were tremendous young people and
leaders as well.
Absolutely, very strong leaders, and just made a significant contribution to our basketball program and represented the institution in a manner that you would want your student athletes to represent you.
Certainly did.
Now we're in a process of can we fill those voids? We're not nearly as strong. We got the nickname, I think, through Sports Illustrated a couple of years ago as the Bruise Brothers.
The Bruise Brothers, right.
We're not nearly ready to bruise people. In fact, we're taking a few more licks than we're giving right now, and that's all part of the growing process. But again, we go back to our front line, and really the only returning player is Lou Stefanovic. Now you go immediately to the sophomore class with Derek Sanders and Billy Bratzik, and then on to the freshman class. So it's a matter of how quickly those youngsters in the freshman and sophomore class, and again I go back to this, can make a very solid, steady type of contribution before I think that we'll be a competitive basketball team.
Well, what's been the biggest surprise so far in practice?
I think it's been William Anderson, ironically enough, the one junior. I think William is playing by far the best basketball that he has played in the 2 previous years. He would have days last year or his freshman year where he was pretty effective, and then he might get lost, and you'd say, gee, was William here today? I mean, relative to the contribution that he made. But what I have seen is a progressive, steady type of contribution from that young man, and I'm very pleased with him. And I think that if he can continue to do this, and we really won't know until we put him in a game-to-game type situation, but if he can do this, I think it really frees Ricky Johnson to be a more versatile type player to play on the front line as well as the back court, as well as and then you're talking about Michael McKinney and Brad Duncan. So I think it gives us a little greater versatility and flexibility in our backcourt.
So you think William may be coming into his own?
I'm very hopeful
junior.
and very optimistic at this point.
Very pleasant and courteous young man, so I'm delighted to hear he's making this progress
He's another youngster that second semester, Dr. Watkins, last year ended up with a 3-point GPA. And he's a type of young man that really has to work exceptionally hard to get that type of academic achievement. Very pleased with him, and he said to me late in the spring, he said, I'm going to end up with a 3-point this semester, and he said, I'll tell you why, I've got my act together and I've got my head screwed on right, and what we're seeing is not only a carryover of that on the basketball court, but again, he's doing fairly well in the classroom.
The discipline seems to carry through on and off court then.
Yes, it does. And
I see.
There's a great correlation between a young man who can discipline himself off the court, assume his responsibilities on a day-to-day basis off the court, in the classroom, in his own personal life, and then the type of contribution on a day-to-day basis that he's able to make when it's time to play basketball.
We probably have a fairly good idea, those of us who attend the games regularly, what we can expect from some of the players that have been with the team. Tell us a little bit about your freshmen. How are this year's freshmen dealing with what must be a pretty tough transition from high school athletic hero, they're all outstanding players, or they wouldn't be here, to freshmen struggling for a little playing time, from living in the structured life of a high school senior to coming into the unstructured, where you're in charge of your own time in part, not during basketball practice, but where you have to make more decisions for yourself. How are they doing, both from the academic and the basketball standpoint?
I think you articulated very well, and that's not surprising. I don't mean to suggest that you wouldn't, but exactly the type of experiences that a young freshman goes through, in that he's not only making an academic or an athletic adjustment, but he's making an academic adjustment, and he's making a social adjustment. Any psychologist or psychiatrist will tell you that one of the 3 most traumatic experiences that a grown adult, you and I, could go through today is if we were to pick our roots up and move to a different community. And here we're asking 18-year-old youngsters not only to pick up their roots and move, but to drastically change. They're trying to learn right now what it is to be a college young man as opposed to a high school boy. And that, I don't mean that in a demeaning sense.
Not at all.
I mean it in the sense of maturity and responsibility. They're trying to figure out what that's all about. They're trying to. Tony Hollifield, one of our freshmen, was a 3.3 GPA average in high school at Oak Park High School in suburban Detroit. And I asked Tony very quickly into the semester what was the greatest difference from an academic standpoint. And he said, the amount of material I have to read and consume in such a short period of time. So now they're going through that, and we put them on the basketball floor, and you're right, they're no longer the hero. All the statistics they bring, so everybody else does, and they're no longer the biggest or the strongest or the quickest or the most agile. They're just a cog in the wheel. And that adjustment is such a tremendous adjustment. Then you add to that the amount of concerted effort they must make on every play, both physically and intellectually, because the demand to concentrate is so much greater on them. All of a sudden, that begins to wear on them a little bit, and they're attempting to survive right now, to adjust to new styles, to new theory. But in addition to that, they don't have time to rest, because the moment they let up, one of the older kids exploits them. They're not used to that. That takes a long time before they're able to.
When you say exploit, you mean they burn them on a...
Absolutely. They burn them on a play. And I let up defensively, and somebody's around me.
Somebody's made 2 points.
I just turn around and shoot the shot like I did in high school, and it gets blocked. I don't go after the rebound, and somebody else has got it. I may get knocked down on my tail, and practice doesn't stop. They all just run, and there I am laying on the floor, and one of the older kids is yelling to me, get up, where in practice everybody would have stopped and held their breath and hoped that I was okay. Here it's just, let's go. And
I guess that the exertion has to be constant. There is no, you can't coast.
No, you can't. You can't coast.
Is that a problem the freshmen have, that some of them are used to the great exertion for a while and then sort of maybe coasting on defense,
really
or kind of letting up a little bit, getting a breather, and not used to that concentration?
They're not used to having the intensity of the environment for a 2 to 2.5 period. It's a period in which they have to they need to adjust, and physically they get bumped and beat up more. And I don't mean beat up in a derogatory sense.
No.
I mean it's just
perfectly
you're dealing
legal.
with young men now. You're not dealing with high school boys. even physically, the pounding they take. And now they leave that and they go where they may have 4 or 5 hours of studying, and they get up the next morning and go through the whole process. And sooner or later, and I tell all of our youngsters that during the recruiting process, I said, sooner or later you're going to get to the point where you say, what am I doing? Why am I here? I wish I was home where Mom were fixing me a meal.
Or where everybody downtown knows you and here nobody does.
Absolutely.
Different life.
And a different life, totally. I would say that's the greatest adjustment.
How do you think they're responding, Bob? Are they doing all
they're
right?
positive. I think
Good.
we give them a lot of feedback. We let them know that we expect some of this. We want them to continue to pursue. We're not pleased with where they are, but we're pleased with their progress. And if they aren't pleased with at least their attempt, we're quick to let them know that too, Terry.
Let's talk a little bit about changes you foresee in college basketball and what you'd like to see done. I've heard a rumor running around the campus that you've become a proponent of the 30-second clock. Is that correct, or am I just hearing things?
I'm for the 10-second clock.
I see. I knew you wanted the fast
speed. It's too slow. Absolutely.
What do you really think about where we're going, and what do you personally want to see happen in college basketball?
I think we've seen a lot of experimentation in the last few years. Like any other field, experimentation is necessary. We need men in our profession who are constantly saying, I wonder if. If not, you become stagnant. What I'm concerned about right now is the impact of television on our game to the effect or to the extent that they're beginning to determine exactly what renovations or what new developments there will be in basketball. I think that is the primary reason why we're seeing the emphasis put on our day and age on the shot clock. Recently, I held a press conference. And at that press conference, that particular subject was brought up. As you are both well aware, the Missouri Valley Conference will have a 45-second shot clock throughout the entire contest this year. I happen to be the only coach that voted against that. Some coaches weren't necessarily in favor of it, but they said, hey, Bobby, it's going to be there anyway, so let's go ahead and vote.
Better 45 than 30, perhaps.
Absolutely, yeah. Yes. And I said no, just because I want to take a stand on the issue. What I am not opposed to innovation. What I am opposed to are those rules which take potential coaching situations or coaching strategy out of the coach's hands. That's where we get into the shot clock. Let me refer back to some of the ball games just with Bradley University that we've had in the last 2 to 3 years. Bradley would be playing a particular defense and a zone defense, and I would, at one point in the game, once we were ahead, pull the ball back out and say, no, you're no longer going to play that defense. I'm going to tell you how you will play. Now, that's a coaching strategy.
Exactly.
And what I'm doing is saying you will play the game the way I dictate. And in addition to that, what we're telling Bradley is, I know this is what you want to do, this is what you've worked on, but now I'm going to make you go to something which maybe you're not as proficient or as good at.
Of course, they try to do the same to us.
Absolutely. That's part
like
of
the chess game that it is.
The shot clock,
Exactly.
to a great extent, takes that particular coaching philosophy or that strategy away. Now, the rebuttal is, well, you make it less interesting for the fans. Well, most games are never determined by the shot clock anyway. So you're talking about a very small number of games that could actually be determined by the shot clock. But what you do is you take strategy away. And I have said very categorically, all right, then what we need to do is establish priorities. Is the coach's number one priority to make it as entertaining for the fans as is possible, or is his number one priority to do the very best job that he can of putting his players in an environment where he believes they have the best chance of winning the game? I said, tell me what the number one priority is, and then I will tell you what rule innovations we should have. And that's where I have facetiously said, if it's for fans and that's our number one priority, then let's put in a 10-second clock.
You know, I think the fans here have become so sophisticated, though, over the last several years, that they really enjoy the strategy part of games as well as just the slam dunk. I really believe that you remember the cheers that would come up when we do hold the ball and do force the other team out of a zone and into a man-to-man and playing our game we want to play.
I concur with that, and I think because they are now understanding that, hey, it is like a chess game.
Right.
Here's exactly, now when coach does that, let's see what the opponent does. Will he play into Bob's hands? Will he try to force Bob to do something that Bob maybe hadn't anticipated? I think it's a much more sophisticated crowd as well as supported crowd than when we first came here at Illinois State. Secondly, I think what it does, one of my complaints about the NBA is that with the shot clock, you basically have teams that are all alike. There is no diversification at that level. Here, one night you may see a Nolan Richardson trap all over the floor, run type team. Then you may bring in a team that will use zones and compact, or you'll get a DePaul that will change their defenses. I think that the difference in philosophies has helped keep college basketball interesting and young. What you see in the NBA are really not identities. With rare exceptions like the Boston Celtics, most towns that have a team, or most communities that have a team, really identify with players. They don't identify with a team as they do in baseball, for example. Right. But at college level, we don't have that. Right now, it's the Redbirds or the Blue Demons or the Shockers. But and part of that is because of the diversification. Well, now all of a sudden what we're saying is we need to all look alike. And I'm totally opposed to that concept.
Well, he mentioned interesting and young. I think basketball coaching is keeping our Bob Donewald both interesting and young, but he's looking awfully good and ready for another season. Terry, this has been, for me, a fascinating preview of Bob's program for this year, and furthermore, a good overview of what we know about the work he does in long-term programmatic development on campus. So, Bob, we're awfully glad you could be with us today. Terry, I'll turn the program over to you now.
Well, thank you both, gentlemen. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another conversation with Dr. Watkins. And as always, we invite your questions about matters of general interest to the university. Send them to Terry Bush, WGLT, 310 Educational Media Center, Illinois State University, Normal, Illinois, 61761.